Today's video is Atheism is Empty by Cameron Jackson. So let's get to it.
But I want to go back to those instances where you're talking to lay atheists, people who come to you at work and they're like, "Carl, you're crazy. How do you believe in this God thing?" And you've told me some fascinating stories in the past about those conversations with atheists. And how do you approach it with them? And what do they say to you first? And what's their response when you give them your bit, so to speak, on the existence of God?
Well, unfortunately, those experiences, while gratifying, maybe because you find out that there's not a lot of substance behind their pushback. I'm going to say in general, and I don't want to generalize, but a lot of the atheists that I've talked to, they have sound bites,
talking points
that when you push them on those sound bites, there's really no substance.
First off the bat, what is a lay atheist? A layman typically refers to a non-ordained member of a church or a person without profession-specific knowledge, such as irrelevant jargon. Atheism is not a religion, so surely all atheists are lay atheists in that sense. As for having specialised knowledge in what? Now maybe you mean they don't know much about religion and counter-apologetics, but then why would you examine ways to respond to them over those who are knowledgeable on the topic? If I want to prove a point, I don't go after the weakest rendition of an argument, I go after the strongest. Because in testing that, I can be sure that I'm testing it to its limit. As for an atheist referring to various talking points, how else are you meant to examine a collection of over 27 books with someone without referring to specific examples? Fact is, the atheist doesn't have to discuss or even know every intricacy of the Bible, unlike the Christian, since all the atheist has to do to invalidate the Bible as a divinely inspired word of some all-powerful deity is to point out a single flaw, whilst the theist has to defend said Bible against every single one of those flaws. You've made your deity so large that the slightest problem brings your entire position down, which is something that's been done countless times throughout history.
I said, do you, and I was trolling her, I said, okay, do you believe in the Big Bang? And blank look. And I don't know. So I said, okay, well, I said, even Stephen Hawking, who was an atheist and talked about the randomness, pretty much every scientist will say, okay, the universe had a beginning and there was a Big Bang.
And your basis for that statement is what exactly? You seem to be lumping two distinct events, the start of the universe and the Big Bang, in together. The latter is the scientific consensus, but contrary to your pretense here, it in no way means that the universe did not exist in some timeless quantum state at the centre of singularity. Indeed, this is one of the various hypotheses which we are attempting to investigate, even though it poses incredible challenges due to the very nature of the quantum realm and the effects of time. But all that can really be said is that the Big Bang was a measurable event that shifted the universe from singularity into current state. So what you are saying here doesn't match at all with what the science actually says. All of this is of your own creation.
And I said, that is a huge problem if you're an atheist. I said, because that shows this thing had a beginning. And I said, so, do you think nothing can cause something? And she goes, absolutely. I said, all right, well, let me ask you this. I go, what's more plausible? That something causes something or nothing causes something? She goes, they're equal. I said, okay, then if that's true, why don't rhinoceroses appear right here? Why can't things, right now, why isn't that continually happening? No answer. No response. So I said, if the universe, I said, let's assume, I said, so me, I said, I'm looking at what's more plausible, nothing or something. There's a first cause. And, with Sam Harris, he thinks we don't need, I want to go back to Sam Harris because,
it's the anchor of this conversation. So
right, I want to go back to that. And she goes, maybe something caused the universe. I said, but, she goes, well, there could be other universes. I said, absolutely. I said, but right now, we have no evidence for that. So you can put your belief in something we have no evidence of as long as it's not God. Well, okay, now she's in that spot. She goes, well, I'll grant this. Maybe there was something. Maybe there is a higher form of intelligence that created the universe. And I said, well, that would be God.
Right.
I know you don't like the word, but that's God.
So any interdimensional being is equivalent to God. Also, how would you get from that to the Christian idea of God? But rewinding for a second, a self-forming universe does not violate anything we observe in said universe. We've never witnessed energy and matter coming into existence besides the virtual particles popping in and out of it. So you have no basis to assert that the universe requires a cause, and certainly none that asserts it requires a supernatural cause. Thus far, all we've observed in our universe is natural, so to go off the rails and invent some supernatural entity is just absurd. As for your rhinoceros question, self-forming matter and energy is not the same as spontaneous generation of entire living organisms of your arbitrary choice. This is just a bloated straw man, and if this woman did exist and the conversation did go as you describe, I feel sorry that she had to deal with your deliberate misportrayal of what she stated. And the fact that you are boasting about said deliberate misportrayal is rather telling of your character and lack of intellectual integrity overall. As for multiverse, you are correct in that it's not a proven fact, but it is a hypothesis with testable merit and is thus being investigated by science, unlike your deity. Your deity doesn't even make it to the level of hypothesis, which is why it's not discussed in science. If I heard a jar placed on the side of a counter smash, what would be more likely? A leprechaun did it, or my cat did it. Not all claims on universal origins are made equal, and the multiverse hypothesis far exceeds theistic claims of creation, so either provide evidence for God or learn to deal with it.
So, consistently, and then I asked her, like with another thing that happens is, the atheist viewpoint is, look, everything's random. The universe came together. Who we are, our consciousness, our ability to rationally think, is the result of just random forces in the universe. So I said this. I go, so if they've looked at the human genome, if it's got 3 billion characters that are put together that make up our internal software, give us all of that. I go, what are the odds of that? That it just came together randomly. I said, now here's me. I'm in a court. I'm trying to adjudicate a decision. How does the evidence weigh? And so I said, she goes, well, I don't know what you mean. I said, well, if I knock a box of alphabet cereal over and it says, hi, Jen, how are you this morning? I could, what is the likelihood of that happening? And it spells your name out. I go, how many times would you have to knock that box to have it spell your name and say, good morning, how are you? I go, well, the genetic code is far more sophisticated than that.
And your basis of that claim is what exactly? How are you measuring a unit of complexity? I don't think I'm going to get an answer, but these are important questions to ask whenever said assertion is raised by apologists. Thing is, your analogy is heavily flawed once again, since the structure of DNA is nothing like a sentence formed of letters. This as an analogy is okay to convey an early school understanding to children, but as an adult listening to another adult, it's just plain embarrassing to see you hold to it so literally. That's why we transcribe DNA into something we can actually read. Yes, DNA is information in the open scientific sense, but no, DNA is not information in a strict colloquial sense. There's no intent or design in the structure of DNA. DNA changes from generation to generation and yet remains functional because it's a biological process guided by evolution, which, by the way, is not random. It's naturalistic, but it's a repeated cycle building in complexity over time. Your incredulity, your willful ignorance as to the processes of abiogenesis and evolution are not a good argument. So rather than demand answers about DNA from a random stranger and parading your own ignorance on the topic about as if your personal stink is something to be proud of, have you perhaps considered talking to a geneticist?
And I said, I hear about evolution. And I said, there are all different types of evolution, I said, I'm not a fundamentalist. I don't disagree with evolution within species. But for you to say, that I came from a bird or an ape, there's no evidence of that yet. I do believe in evolution and the evolutionary processes. So when I say a lot of these arguments, they really surface. They'll take what I call, the straw man. You believe in this.
There is only one scientific theory of evolution, and anyone who states otherwise is an active liar or has been suckered in by active liars into spreading said lie without making a reasonable attempt to verify said claim. You don't get to come to the table of science and pick and choose what you want and leave what fundamentally challenges your worldview. As for evidence, try phylogenetics. If you don't know what that is, it's the genetic mapping of all life on this planet to construct a hereditary path, a genetic tree of life. Using the same methods as forensic science, geneticists can actively demonstrate common ancestry to other modern apes, such as chimpanzees and bonobos. This is a positive demonstration, and yet it remains only one way in which we know of our ancestry. I simply go to it as the most direct route, and it corroborated what the fossil record had told us up to that point. The very facts you claim do not exist, but clearly they do. You say you're not a fundamentalist, and yet here you are denying very clear evidence that what you are saying is false. So what are you? A half fundamentalist? Well, I'm sorry, that doesn't exist. You either accept the science, or you don't, and you don't, so you're a fundamentalist. Live with it.
Another example, how can the Bible be true? And Sam Harris goes at length into that. He doesn't believe in revelation. People don't believe. And I said, well, I'm not a fundamentalist. I don't necessarily believe that the earth was created in 6 days. I don't think, what I'm going to say, the story of Genesis was not meant to be a biology or a physics book. It's an attempt by man to explain God. And that's all this is. And people want to make it, no, you have to go exactly by what it says and what it does. And so, I'll tell people, all right, on the seventh day, after God created the universe, I don't think he needed to rest. I don't think he had to take a nap, after he created the universe. So I don't see where you say, well, it didn't happen that way, therefore there can be no God. And
which is okay if you define your God to be lacking a basic sense of competence. Most Christians I know do not. They define their God as not simply competent, but all-powerful and all-knowing. So let's deal with that and work our way in. Why would an all-knowing and all-powerful God settle for a metaphor? If there really is grandeur in God's work, wouldn't that grandeur be better conveyed in an accurate description of what happened? Indeed, the very universe of the Bible is so very small, being the realm of a single planet, our planet held within a snow globe-like dome called the firmament, upon which the stars are painted on, and both the sun and moon, light sources in their own right according to the Bible, move across. Compare that to the trillions of stars within our own galaxy, one of trillions of galaxies out there in the known universe. Also, surely an all-knowing God would see how such incorrect claims would be interpreted as genuine by some of their followers, and that in the future these very same claims would be used to challenge their existence. So why would an all-knowing, all-powerful God settle for such a subpar mess which would riddle their church with so many holes that it's just laughable? Now maybe you'll say it's our fault because our ancestors couldn't understand the intricacies back then. Okay, well first of all, who made us that ignorant back then if that was indeed the case? I don't believe it was, just giving you that hypothetical, whose fault was it? Secondly, if an all-powerful God can't convey a message that is both accurate and easily understood, are they really all-powerful at all? But moving beyond that, what you are saying here would be an insult to even a relatively competent deity that wasn't all-knowing and all-powerful. Why? Well, we see in the New Testament the way in which Jesus utilizes parables to convey certain details about people and their apparent relationship with God. The thing is, they're presented as parables and nothing later on is dependent on said parables being literal. The same cannot be said about Genesis and many of the books Christians like to claim aren't history or science books, but some other crap. Nowhere do they even suggest this to be the case. A competent God could have added, "This is a metaphor for my relationship with you," to the book of Genesis, etc., but they didn't. And when you get to the New Testament and the coming and so-called sacrifice of Christ, do they suggest this to be the case? No. Christ's entire purpose for being there is predicated on the existence of a literal Garden of Eden with both Adam and Eve and the tree from which the fruit was taken, and sin entered the world. Remove Genesis and you lose your basis for the coming of Christ and everything in the New Testament. A relatively competent God would know how to avoid that entire mess, and yet it's there in the Bible. That is the problem.
With a lot of atheists, personally, what I think it is, when you bring God into your life, you're bringing a lot of constraints in terms of really how you should live, how you should lead your life.
How you should beat your Hebrew slaves, how your non-Hebrew slaves are subject to chattel slavery as we think of it when we hear slavery, how long one has to leave a virgin girl who had their family butchered by you before you can rape her. Oh yes, all of this shit is in the Bible. But no, none of that is why I don't believe in your God. I don't believe for one very simple reason. You and every apologist I have ever met has failed to supply the smallest sliver of valid evidence for the existence of your God. And that's not changed by you pretending to know us better than we know ourselves and actively lying, breaking one of your own commandments. That's right, in lecturing us on how we apparently forced ourselves not to believe in God to avoid the restrictions laid down by God, you have inadvertently broken one of said restrictions your God apparently gave you. The fact is, why would I become an atheist to avoid restrictions if I'm only going to turn around and identify myself by the secular philosophy of humanism? It doesn't make sense. I believe rules are required for society to function, I just don't think yours come from a divine source as you claim. Now, I don't follow your code regardless because I don't think discussions of which people you can enslave and what period you must wait to rape someone have a place in modern ethics, but that's regardless of whether or not your God exists. If you prove to me that they did exist and I became a believer, became a theist, I still wouldn't follow their law as written in the Bible is foul and their existence wouldn't compel me to obey or worship them. Just believe in them. I would become a theist in that I'd believe in the Christian God, and if that's what a Christian is, I guess I'd also become a Christian. But if you mean Christian as someone who worships and follows Christ, no, I would not become a Christian. I would be a theist, however.
And a lot of the other atheists, I hear this as another argument. Most of all that's wrong in society has been caused by religion. And I'm going to say, well, wait a minute, hold on. God gets blame for what man does consistently. And then I just heard an atheist on the radio the other day. They said, all the best societies today are the ones that are atheist. And I'm like, well, hold on. China, you're going to put that as being better?
You'd have to go back. I mean, you could even go back to the Soviet Union and say, that was the best. North Korea is the best. I mean, look, they're pointing to the Scandinavian countries, I think,
right,
when they say that. Right? They're pointing to Europe when they say that. And frankly, I'm not sure that Europe is the shining bastion of what's all great in this world right now. And certainly if you really want to go to the extremes of China, North Korea, the Soviet Union, atheist, godless societies, I'm not quite sure they're doing that well.
Yeah, and I'm going to put forth that in a time of a crisis, all these countries that are so-called flourishing, if it comes down to a crisis, it's going to be every man for himself.
Yes.
You're going to see a tremendous change. But you're right. If you look at Pol Pot and you look at
Cambodia,
Cambodian regimes, you look at Russia, you look at Stalin, all these civilizations or these societies that were atheistic, I don't even see how you can possibly make the statement. Those are far better alternative to ones with Judeo-Christian ethics.
If God exists as described in the Bible, all evil in existence is their fault according to said scripture. That's just internally consistent with what your scripture says, and if you dislike that, then I suggest reading your Bible for once without the rose-tinted God goggles. Also, nice strawman there in taking the statement that all of the best societies that exist are secular ones and completely changing it. And yes, they were likely talking about various Scandinavian and Central European nations with both secular laws and high levels of atheism. They very often achieve the highest ratings in such things as life fulfillment and happiness rating, which interconnects to a variety of different criteria important to us as people. Now, how you change this factually sound argument which you later seek to cast doubt on, perhaps feeding off the growing racist hysteria surrounding Europe, which Americans seem to be very partial to, is rather telling. You take the statement, all the best societies are secular, and change that to, all societies which can be linked to atheism in any way are brilliant. The two are not the same, not even close, as an inspection of the Soviets will reveal. Stalin, whilst most likely a non-believer, still reformed the Russian Orthodox Church directly tied to the state in order to pacify resistance to his atrocities. That state-church merger by Stalin is not secularism, and if you believe so, then I suggest adding a dictionary to your reading list along with the Bible. Pol Pot meanwhile took a more direct route in deifying themselves, very similar to the leaders of North Korea. Getting rid of the old religion and replacing it with your own is not the same as secularism. We wouldn't say that the Christianization of Rome made the crumbling Roman Empire secular, even though it's the exact same principle, religion being wielded to offer whoever is in control unquestionable authority. As for a lot of the social ills we face today being caused by religion, focusing on Christianity alone, it's had a large hand in such things as the prolonged justification of slavery. After all, it was Christian ministers in America who taught slave owners how to use the Bible to pacify African slaves. The knock-on effect of this still echoes today. Then there's the way in which it was Christianity that really instilled long-lasting laws against homosexuality and transgender people, making their existence illegal on pain of death in the Theodosian Code in the 4th century Common Era. This was then spread elsewhere during colonialism, which Christianity played a massive part in justifying bringing the true religion to the savages, a practice it still continues today, and many people are oblivious to the fact that it's still an act of colonial violence trying to erase local cultures. So yes, the majority of pain and suffering the LGBT+ community suffers is the product of Christianity. Then there's the treatment of women. I've already given evidence of where the Bible discusses the waiting period to rape virgin girls taken as the spoils of war. By the way, forcing someone who could not consent, such as a captive, or in this case a child captive, into both marriage and sexual intercourse is rape by definition, if you don't know that. Now I could keep going, but I see little reason as, at this point, it'd be overkill.
And that which leads me to another one, going back to evolution. I consistently see that in the evolutionary process, we're evolving. And who we are today is a product of evolution. And I said to myself, okay, well, if that's true, and natural selection, then really Hitler had it right. And that the fact that we're going to care for the poor or take care of the disenfranchised and the marginalized, that's not an evolutionary trait, because my survival and flourishing is based on the strongest and the best continuing to survive and getting rid of everything else.
Yeah, extermination.
So which is it? Is it evolution or is it something else that's impacting that? And people continue to like to pick, what I'm going to say, the Judeo-Christian things versus, some other form or fashion.
How does evolution being true equal Hitler was right? Evolution via natural selection simply notes the way in which the organisms which can best adapt to environmental pressures are most likely to replicate and pass on their genes. So what does that have to do with Hitler and Nazi fascism? Here's something I want you to do for me. I want you to pull out a modern map and try to find me Nazi Germany. Keep looking for it and get back to me when you finally find it. Your asinine understanding of evolution really shines through here. First of all is natural selection and not artificial selection for a reason. Artificial selection gives us entire breeds of dog which literally cannot give birth on their own. Secondly, strongest or fittest is not meant in the purely athletic sense, but in an abstract one. Our cooperation, which is founded upon common empathy and compassion, is strength, is fitness. But like a child talking about what the best animal is, you can only think of it in relatively simple terms. Or so it would appear. Meanwhile, that's not actually how biology and indeed evolution work. It's all a little more complicated than that. And I think that acts as a pretty good summary of your entire approach in this video. You think of things in such simple terms and when challenged on that seemingly revel in your ignorance because if someone is saying something that you don't have the ability or desire to understand, that must mean what they are saying isn't true. It's just more hollow projection from Christian apologists and does nothing to advance the discussion at all. Hi there. I'd just like to say a few things here at the end of the video before you go. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone who's ever donated to the channel via Patreon, giving a special thanks to the following people: Hannah Banghart, Matthew Kovac, John Schoenrock, Daniel Martinez, and Alexander Williams. Your support has ensured this channel's ability to grow over the years. I'd also like to ask that you comment down below and like this video, as well as subscribe, hit the bell icon, and follow Essence of Thought on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Please also consider following Atheist Alliance International on Facebook, a humanist organisation dedicated to helping atheists around the globe. Lastly, I'd like to request that you treat the people responded to in this video with a reasonable degree of respect. Whilst we understand that there are justifiable limits to said respect when tackling certain heavy topics and anger can be a genuine emotion in fighting injustice, any comments utilising language which insults others on the basis of perceived gender, sexuality, ethnicity or ability both mental and physical will be removed immediately and the commenter may be blocked on the moderator's discretion. Let's work to keep this space one which upholds the values of humanism. Thank you.